It was previously reported that some 16,000 foreign fighters would be joining the Ukrainian war on the side of Ukraine. We're now getting reporting that Russia has recruited Syrians specializing in urban warfare to join them in their fight against Ukraine. Now, of course, the Russians aren't calling what they're doing in Ukraine a war. It's a limited or special military operation. But of course, we are dangerously close to war. We've got this guy. Let me show you this guy. Bill Ackman says Russia's attack on Ukraine means World War III has likely already started. Now, I know there are a lot of people who don't like the phrase. I don't know what to tell you when people are saying that, and there are very disturbing signs, including foreign individuals joining one side of the war effort on either side. Now, of course, with Russia, they're recruiting Syrians specifically, but this is bringing in Syrian nationals into the war effort on the side of Russia. When it comes to Ukraine, there was a vote in Latvia allowing Latvian civilians to join the Ukrainian war effort, and now we are hearing that even U.S. veterans will be joining the war on the side of Ukraine. At what point do we just say this is international conflict? NATO is already set to be providing jets to Ukraine. They're already helping in Poland. And on the cyber war front, it seems the West is fully engaged. Now, let me show you where it gets personal. In this story from Daily Mail, there are no words to express the pain. Wife of WNBA star Brittany Griner, arrested on drug charges in Russia, says she's in pain as she anxiously awaits to hear from her. Now, I'll get into this story later on. I want to focus on the foreign fighters who are joining the fray. But the point is, this woman, this WNBA star, was arrested apparently for having a vape pen. Many believe that this, in fact, is an attempt by Russia to get an American hostage. Decently high profile. I'm not going to pretend like the WNBA is the epitome of American culture, but this is someone who took that insane risk of going into Russia at a time of war. So, is it World War III? Far be it from me to say exactly, definitively that it is. Do we have a quasi-international war happening? Yes. Literally. That's only a matter of time before this escalates because there's no signs that anyone is backing down. The latest news reports are that Putin is shelling civilians. Vladimir Putin, or I should say Russia, has issued demands that Ukraine give up any chance of ever joining any kind of bloc like the EU or NATO. They give up the Donbass region and Crimea. Ukraine is basically saying never going to happen. But then we're hearing the leadership in Ukraine call out to NATO saying, defend us. And they've already applied to join the EU, which, of course, as I stated to many others, was a provocation. Maybe it was legitimate. Ukraine really does want to be in the EU. It'll be great for their economy. But of course, that was spitting on Putin at a time when he was invading their country. If more foreigners keep joining this fight, then basically what we have is both sides kind of playing the stupid game of chicken. Nobody really wants to say that they've declared war or it's getting to that point. But when American veterans, when citizens from a NATO country are joining the effort and NATO is supplying weapons, please tell me how this doesn't make it international war. Is it because NATO has to formally state it? Or that troops under the command of a government officially must do it? Well, that's ridiculous. You could just have any NATO country be like, okay, you guys are all like top-ranking special dudes in the military. We're just going to call you civilians. Go fight. It makes no sense if you were to ask me. And now, of course, we're hearing from China. China says that if Taiwan tries doing anything like what Ukraine did, or let's just say they're warning the U.S. and Taiwan, because maybe there's going to be a Pacific Defense Pact. I mean, there are certain agreements for sure. But what China is saying, Taiwan better not play that game. And of course, we're seeing the financial, the collapse of these financial ties between these countries. And it seems like we very well may be looking at international war. Maybe not World War III, I don't know, but some people certainly think so. Well, let's get started with the first story before we get into the, predictions by Bill Ackman or the story of this WNBA star. Let's take a look at what's actually happening with Russia bringing in the Syrians. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member if you want to help support the work that I do with these videos, as well as our journalists. Go to timcast.com, check out our reporting. We have tons of great journalists working day and night to get you awesome stories. Not always political, not always pessimistic. Hey, here's a story. You can now spend the night with monkeys, tigers, and chimps at a sanctuary in Ohio, written by Cassandra Fairbanks. We've also got a lot of big, important news. We have reporters on the ground right now at the trucker convoy. And if you like the work we do, become a member, and you will also get access to exclusive podcasts from Timcast IRL. You can find them on the website. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Let's read this story from the Wall Street Journal. Russia recruiting Syrians for urban combat in Ukraine, U.S. officials say. I don't want to bury the lead too much, so we'll read this, but I also want to highlight this story from BuzzFeed News. A team of American and British Special Forces veterans are preparing to join Ukraine's fight against Russia. And now we have a photo. First foreigners have already joined International Legion, Ukraine's volunteer military force, and are fighting outside of Kiev. According to the Ukrainian ground forces, the volunteers come from the US, UK, Sweden, Lithuania, Mexico, and India. How is this not international conflict? It's weird, isn't it? I think the idea of limited warfare, or this idea that we have to play a game of chess, is apparent in everyone's minds. Well, the U.S. can deny involvement. These are just random people. Don't blame us. We didn't endorse or support this, but I got to stop. Latvia outright did endorse it. The Wall Street Journal reports Moscow is recruiting Syrians skilled in urban combat to fight in Ukraine as Russia's invasion is poised to expand deeper into cities, according to U.S. officials. An American assessment indicates that Russia, which has been operating inside Syria since 2015, has in recent days been recruiting fighters from there, hoping their expertise in urban combat can help them take Kiev and deal a devastating blow to the Ukraine government. According to 4 American officials, the move points to a potential escalation of fighting in Ukraine, experts said. It is unclear how many fighters have been identified, but some are already in Russia preparing to enter the conflict, according to one official. Officials declined to elaborate on what else is known about the deployment of Syrian fighters to Ukraine, the status or precise scale of the effort. According to a publication, based in Deir ez-Zor, Syria, Russia has offered volunteers from the country between $200 and $300 to go to Ukraine and operate as guards for 6 months at a time. I got to pause and say, I hope it's not a one-time flat fee because that doesn't seem to be that doesn't seem to be worth it. Chechen forces have also been deployed to Ukraine, according to a Reuters report, citing Ramzan Kadyrov, the leader of the Chechen Republic and an ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Fighters are also pouring into the country to fight on the side of Kiev-based government. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said last week that 16,000 foreigners have volunteered to fight for Ukraine, part of what he described as an international legion. With volunteers from other countries flowing into Ukraine, the conflict there could become a new center of gravity for foreign fighters, said Jennifer Caffarella, National Security Fellow at the Institute for the Study of War in Washington, D.C. Quote, the Russian deployment of foreign fighters from Syria into Ukraine internationalizes the Ukraine war, and therefore could link the war in Ukraine to broader cross-regional dynamics, particularly in the Middle East. Tens of thousands of troops are inside Ukraine, and mortar, missiles, and other attacks are occurring daily in the northern, eastern, and southern regions of the country. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have fled the cities, which were home to roughly 2/3 of the population before the invasion began on February 24th. Ukraine remains in the hands of Mr. Zelensky's government, and the largest cities, Kiev, the capital, and Kharkiv in the east, remain under government control. Russia has taken over the port city of Kherson, and Ukraine's other cities now face an assault from Russia. Syrian fighters have spent nearly a decade fighting urban warfare, while Russia's largely conscripted force lacks this skill set. Ms. Caffarella said, Syrian forces deployed to Ukraine could also be asked to work a support role based on how they worked in Syria with the Wagner Group, a mercenary force that some see as a proxy for the Russian government. Charles Lister, a Syria expert at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., questioned how useful the recruits from the Middle East could be in Ukraine. Mr. Lister said, there are some Russian-trained Syrians who were involved in hunting members of the Islamic State who might be in Ukraine, but generally Moscow didn't consider Syrian fighters to be good at urban warfare. Quote, bringing Syrians into Ukraine is like bringing Martians to fight on the moon. Mr. Lister said, they don't speak the language, the environment is totally different. Russia has been a key backer of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad since it entered the conflict, largely through airstrike, as well as Russian armed forces. The Wagner Group, which arrived in Syria shortly after Russia entered the conflict on behalf of the Assad regime, has conducted support operations such as seizing oil and gas fields and securing other government infrastructure, such as airports. Russia, which positioned nearly 200,000 troops along the Ukrainian border in the weeks leading up to the invasion, said Wednesday 498 of its troops have been killed and another 1,597 have been injured, a rare public admission of battlefield losses. Others have put the figure much higher, including the Ukrainian government armed forces general staff, which according to a Reuters report said the The estimate for Russian troop deaths was closer to 11,000. Okay, I certainly don't believe 11,000. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia was downplaying it. But this, to me, is absolutely fascinating and horrifying. The Jerusalem Post. Ukraine launches foreign fighter recruitment website. A website to guide foreign fighters to enlist with the International Defense Legion of Ukraine was launched on Sunday night by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. The enlistment website includes a step-by-step guide on how to join the Legion, including specific contact information for individual countries. Israel was one of the countries included with detailed contact details. Volunteers were instructed to contact the Ukrainian embassy in their country for an interview. After filling out documents, they would get instructions on how to travel to Ukraine and join operational units. President Zelensky has created the International Legion of Ukraine, consisting of foreign citizens wishing to join the resistance against the Russian occupants and fight for global security. Join the Legion and help us defend Ukraine, Europe, and the world. We got a rock and a hard spot on our hands. There's many who have said that if we do not save Ukraine, we are signaling to China that Taiwan is fair game and we will not save them either. I'm not entirely convinced because, well, the U.S. has already shown willingness to defend Taiwan, particularly when Chinese destroyers or fleets move through the South China Sea or between Taiwan. What is it? The Strait of I can't remember the name of the specific body of water. But the U.S. does send naval vehicles in the area to maintain the peace, as it were. With Ukraine, the U.S. is more reluctant to get involved, but there's an inverse here. If the U.S. does get involved with Ukraine, China will see an opportunity and they will move in on Taiwan. Now, I don't know exactly what will happen. I think it's fair to say, as I often do, I can't see the future. I did not foresee this. I did not think this was going to happen, but take it from me. Don't take it from me, right? If I tell you, here's what I think may happen because of something that's happening, take it with a grain of salt. May or may not be true. I don't know. My personal opinion on what's happening, hit or miss, as it often is. Maybe slightly leaning towards I get some things right sometimes. We talked about the culture war, the escalation, and what was going to happen. We get some of these things right, but honestly, I don't know everything. There are a lot of variables here that I don't see. What I can tell you is, let's bring all these pieces together. Ukraine is overtly trying to bring in foreign citizens. American and British special forces are reportedly already on the ground. What do you think Russia is going to say when you've got US, UK, Sweden, Lithuania, Mexico, and India sending in fighters on behalf of Ukraine? Now, the reason why I say it's quasi-international war is because India is officially neutral, and in many ways, they do side with Russia. As part of the BRICS nations, they kind of can go either way, right? Some Chinese banks have said no to Russia. Some are going to allow the mere payment system to move forward to counter Visa and MasterCard shutting down operations in Russia. At the same time, TikTok, which is basically China, is backing away and saying we're not going to allow operations. It's hard to know how this goes, something many of us didn't expect. Take a look at this story from February 28th, Reuters. Latvia allows its citizens to fight in Ukraine. Quote, our citizens who want to support Ukraine and volunteer to serve there, to defend Ukraine's independence, our common security must be able to do so, said Juris Rankanis, a chairman of the Parliamentary Defense, Home Affairs, and Corruption Prevention Commission, which drafted the law. Latvia's parliament voted unanimously on Monday to allow its nationals to fight in Ukraine if willing, the parliament said in a statement. Well, Russia has responded. Russia vows prosecution of foreign fighters after 16,000 join Ukraine. Russia threatened to bring criminal prosecution against any foreigners who travel to Ukraine to fight with the Eastern European nation as Moscow continues to press its internationally condemned invasion of the country. The Russian invasion entered a second week on Thursday after Russian President Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale assault. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced Sunday he was establishing an international legion. This we now know about. So Russia has responded. They're going to take action. In response to the creation of the new foreign legion, a spokesman for the Russian military said that Moscow would not treat these volunteers the same as it would Ukrainian soldiers, threatening them with more severe repercussions. Quote, I wish to make an official statement that none of the mercenaries the West is sending to Ukraine to fight for the nationalist regime in Kiev can be considered as combatants in accordance with international humanitarian law or enjoy the status of prisoners of war. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov said Thursday, Russia's TASS news agency reported. Konashenkov continued saying, at best, they can be expected to be prosecuted as criminals. He warned foreign nationals to think a dozen times before traveling to fight alongside Ukrainians. Russia has faced substantial international backlash. I'm sure this many of you are aware of. Let's talk about this. The potential for World War III. Forgive me if people don't want to hear the phrase. I think it's a fair point and a fair criticism. Some people have said, Tim is saying everything is World War III, blah, blah, blah. No, only because it's being reported in the media. I want to make this clear. I certainly have opinions on the news that's being reported. I certainly have a news organization with a team of journalists reporting the news. But my response to these to statements of World War III, for the most part, I'm not going to pretend like I don't question World War III. When it comes to the idea of civil war or World War III, I don't want people to believe it's inevitable. I do personally, my opinion is some of these things may be, notably that the U.S. is headed towards some kind of civil war, especially when you look at gas prices and inflation and what's happening now with Russia. It could exacerbate things. As for World War III, I don't think we're at that point yet. And in fact, in a previous segment, I said we are not in World War III. Not yet, but it's possible. We're not talking about fictional reality. Billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman has warned that World War III is likely already started amid Russia's ongoing attack on Ukraine. Ackman argued that Western failure to intervene in Moscow's invasions of Georgia and Crimea has emboldened Russian President Vladimir Putin to take more. But he said that ultimately the key to ending the crisis in Ukraine sat with China. Now, I want to get into his thoughts and opinions. This is a billionaire hedge fund manager. It doesn't mean he's the smartest guy in the world. It could just be that he can see more, but he could be wrong about a lot. We all are. We all want to say we know, but we don't know. There are a lot of, I'll say this, there's propaganda coming after my channels for sure. Spamming comments, disliking and trying to get my content banned. I'm not saying everybody who disagrees with me is a bot, but I'm saying there are certainly bots because you can see the repeat messages. Russia didn't do this. Russia didn't do that. Yo, I know it's propaganda, a lot of it. I know they manipulate a lot of it. I can only report on what seems to be the case for the most part. This story to me right here with Brittany Griner may be one of the most shocking. If Russia really is arresting someone for having a vape pen and calling it drug smuggling, this could be because of the conflict and they have a hostage. Or it could be that they just don't allow vape pens, I guess. The Daily Mail reports Brittany Griner's wife says there are no words to express her grief as the WNBA star remains detained in Russia on drug charges. "We love you, babe," Sherelle Griner wrote in a new Instagram post alongside a picture of the 31-year-old Phoenix Mercury center and other family members. Griner, who had been playing professionally in Russia, was detained last month after a vape pen filled with hash oil was allegedly found in her luggage in a Moscow airport, according to the authorities. Her arrest was not revealed until Saturday. She faced up to 10 years in prison in a Russian prison on drug smuggling charges. Our hearts are all skipping beats every day that goes by without hearing from you. It's not clear where Griner is being detained. Her agent did not immediately respond to Daily Mail's request for comment. This could be nothing. I mean, this could be a criminal. This could be a WNBA player who had hash oil, committed a crime, and got caught. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said the U.S. will provide every possible assistance to citizens who are being held in foreign countries as the war in Ukraine continues. But of course, I want to point out, I don't simply highlight a story that says someone was arrested in some place to purposefully try and link it. I don't actually like stories being linked for the most part. But this is a very real possibility. And many people have actually mentioned this could be related. Some saying that this could be an attempt as taking a hostage. Blinken currently is in Eastern Europe amid the Ukraine war. He was asked on Sunday about U.S. efforts to secure her release. There's only so much I can say given the privacy considerations at this point. Whenever an American is detained anywhere in the world, we of course stand ready to provide every possible assistance. He added, "We have an embassy team that's working on cases of other Americans who are detained in Russia. We're doing everything we can to see to it that their rights are upheld and respected." We can see her in these photos. Griner is pictured putting her bag through a scanner after she was approached by a sniffer dog. Pictured in black, she is seen stopped by airport police after a sniffer dog picked up something in her bag. Then they go on to say, on Saturday, Sherelle Griner pleaded for her partner's release from Russian jail. "I love my wife wholeheartedly, so this message comes during one of the weakest moments in my life. I understand that many of you have grown to love BG over the years and have concerns and want details." Griner was detained last month while flying in to play for her Russian basketball team during the WNBA offseason. But there has been no confirmed date of when she was arrested. Her last communication was February 5th, when she posted a photo to Instagram of her and the Phoenix Mercury teammates. Now, Russia might use Griner as leverage as she faces up to 10 years in prison. Quote, "If we want her out of jail, Russia is going to have some terms," former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia and Ukraine, Evelyn Farkas, told Yahoo Sports. "It could be a prisoner swap. They could also use it as an implicit threat or blackmail to get us to do something or not to do something. Either way, they find it useful." Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who represents Griner's hometown of Houston and says she knew the star back when she played high school ball, said during a press conference that she has spoken with the State Department in an effort to get the star released. "We know that there was some issue dealing with the vape cartridge and other items, but let me be very clear. Brittany Griner is a U.S. citizen. She was a guest in Russia. I will be demanding her release. I don't want to disregard a sovereign nation, but Putin has disregarded sovereign nations his entire service in this world, and anyone that is killing and attacking and destroying Ukraine, their neighboring country, it does not bother them, has no right to hold Mrs. Griner, period. If there is challenges and concerns about her actions, it should be dealt with diplomatically, and she should be released." So I'll stress this. She was arrested well before the conflict began. The fear, I suppose, Russia has absolutely been planning for this. They've been building up troops on the border. They knew they were going to be moving in. But I got to be honest. I don't think that Russia staged a hoax to try and arrest this woman. I do believe the reason this is relevant is that if war is escalating, and it appears to be, if war does escalate, this absolutely will cause a problem for Brittany Griner and absolutely play out some way in this international conflict. Anytime there's citizens on either side, you're going to have some kind of request for a prisoner exchange or something to that effect. Russia will use every asset it has. And you know what? Griner may end up being a bit piece, kind of negligible in the whole grand scheme of things. With the news coming out, however, you've got a story here. Ultimately, maybe I spent too much time on this because maybe it's nothing, to be completely honest. Just another person who tried carrying a hash vape pen, and there you go. Maybe Russia lied. Honestly, I have no idea. I just feel that we're going to see more stories like this, and they're going to keep trying to insinuate or present some kind of relation to the war. The West may try to be blaming Russia, saying they're doing it on purpose because of the war, to put Russia in a position where they're forced to back down because they don't want to be seen as taking hostages. The bigger question is, how far will this go? Well, Fiona Hill, like her or hate her, she says, yes, he would. What does that mean? Fiona Hill on Putin and nukes. Yeah, I think he would. I agree. This is from February 28th. For many watching the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for many people, the Russian invasion of Ukraine felt like a series of he can't be doing this moments. Russia's Vladimir Putin has launched the largest ground war in Europe since the Second World War, and it's quite literally mind-boggling. The writer says they reached out to Fiona Hill, one of America's most clear-eyed Russian experts. Well, I certainly disagree with that. I think Fiona Hill is kind of off a rocker and obsessed, and her view is, let's just say she's hyper-focused. There's other things at play here internationally. But the gist of it is, yes, he would. Would Vladimir Putin use nukes? Some people have told me mutually assured destruction would prevent him from doing so. And let's just drop the debate. Fine. In the instance of ICBMs, perhaps. In the instance of tactical nukes and nuclear artillery, I'd say no. The use of high-powered nuclear weapons on military targets, I believe Vladimir Putin absolutely has on the table. Now, ultimately, I don't know where this goes. I can't make predictions. I was wrong. I'm gonna say it outright. I was talking about all these predictions. Nah, he won't do this. He won't do that. Wrong. It seems like things are escalating to a dangerous degree. Let me show you this from China. Bloomberg reports China warns U.S. against forming Pacific NATO and backing Taiwan. To me, this does kind of seem a lot like China's not in the spotlight. You know, Russia moves into Ukraine and now the whole world is focused there. And then, like, there is no Pacific NATO, basically. And so they're like, well, you better not do that with Taiwan. And the U.S. is just like, we didn't. We're over here. Like, okay, China. Here's the story. China warned the U.S. against trying to build what it called a Pacific version of NATO, while declaring that security disputes over Taiwan and Ukraine were not comparable at all. Foreign Minister Wang Yi told his annual news briefing Monday that the real goal of the U.S.'s Indo-Pacific strategy was to form Asia's answer to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. China has often accused the U.S. of trying to form blocs to suppress its growth, a complaint that's likely to attract greater attention after President Vladimir Putin cited similar grievances before his invasion of Ukraine. The perverse actions run counter to the common aspiration of the region for peace, development, cooperation, and win-win outcomes. They are doomed to fail. I don't think China's wrong. I think the U.S. absolutely does want to create expanding blocs like NATO. NATO's purpose, basically stopping the Soviet Union. And now there are questions about what NATO is doing. Well, inhibiting the growth of blocs outside of NATO. Look, NATO forms, we're going to stop the Soviets. Basically, the Soviets collapse. Is NATO just going to be like, now we dissolve? Of course not. Those who have power don't want to give it up. And the people at the highest levels of NATO, they're probably thinking, what if something else rises in its stead? The more powerful our bloc is, the more likely it is to prevent the emergence of another bloc. And then, war. Wrong. As we can see with the BRICS nations. Of course, I certainly can't predict how things will play out. There are Chinese banks that are backing Russia in the face of these sanctions, but we're getting news that TikTok is basically saying, nah, we're going to shut down in Russia. Apparently, we have the story from the Daily Mail. TikTok, American Express, and PricewaterhouseCoopers all suspend operations in Russia. Social media giant joins firms boycotting Russia over censorship as economic vice tightens on Moscow. TikTok suspended all live streaming and content sharing in Russia on Sunday. Apparently, people in Russia can't see outside using TikTok either. So it's not just they can't post, they also can't see what other people are doing. So I think basically it just basically means it's shut down. Now, maybe this means that TikTok isn't as heavily entrenched with China as many people want to believe. I don't know for sure. But it shows there are a lot of interests cutting Russia off and that there is an escalation. And it's not so absolute. China may be joining with Russia. India, Brazil, South Africa, we don't know for sure. This is a large economic bloc, so maybe ultimately we see something happening. But it kind of does feel like Russia has been isolated. Even though NATO and the West has limited the growth of other economic blocs, the BRICS nations, which are powerful, don't seem willing to play that game. And now we have this from Timcast. Financial giants cut ties with China. The majority of the big four accounting firms globally have decided to cut ties with China, impacting thousands of employees. On Monday, Ernst Young said it would sever its ties with operations in Russia, echoing similar choices by KPMG and PwC, a significant move by three of the world's big four accounting and consulting firms. The big four, which also includes Deloitte, handles the audits of most blue chip companies. Their work and reports are often vital to obtaining international investor backing for their clients. Quote, in light of the escalating war, the EY global organization will no longer serve any Russian government clients, state-owned enterprises, or sanctioned entities and individuals anywhere in the world. EY has commenced a restructuring of its Russian member firm to separate it from the global network. I don't think it is that each of these groups are taking hard moral stances. I think it's that with the announcement of sanctions by financial institutions and the cutting off of, in many ways, banks, almost from SWIFT, but many banks are cut off from SWIFT. These financial firms are like, we don't want to be attached to Russia when all this stuff is falling down. So one by one, the lines are being severed. Ultimately, my fear is you sever enough, you unleash Russia, and they say, if we have nothing left to lose, so be it. The only thing we have to lose is our nuclear arsenal or our military, in which case they'll use it to get what they want. Now, as an aside, perhaps one of the, I don't know what you'd call this. Maybe it's fake news or one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard publicly expressed. Trump's wild scheme, bomb the ish out of Russia with US F-22s disguised as Chinese planes. The former president lets donors in on a plan that's so crazy it might trigger a nuclear war. Speaking with Republican donors Saturday night, former President Donald Trump spitballed a wildly dangerous idea, a false flag basically, proposing the U.S. bomb Russia, disguise the planes as China, to trick Vladimir Putin into fighting the CCP. That makes literally no sense. And then we say China did it. We didn't do it. China did it. And then they start fighting with each other and we sit back and watch, Trump said, according to the Washington Post, which obtained a recording of the speech. To be clear, when Trump says we sit back and watch, he's talking about a war that would kill thousands or millions of people. I don't believe it. I think they've lied so much about what Trump really wants. The goal of this story is, well, elections are coming up, midterms. Trump's going to be endorsing people. And then we're going to have an election in 2024. Smear tactics, smear campaigns. Now, look, maybe Trump said something to this effect, but I don't know the context, and I don't trust the Rolling Stone or the Washington Post to be honest about it. That's why I say it's probably fake news in a certain way, or it's the craziest idea I've ever heard. false flags, they happen. Gulf of Tonkin. Take a look at Operation Northwoods. L.L. Lemnitzer proposing that we, get fake Cubans to attack us in Florida so we could justify an invasion. False flags work. Fog of war, man. The U.S. was accusing Russia of preparing for a false flag attack. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You know why? One, the U.S. saying it does nothing. Because even if Russia could then, look, they come out and say, Russia's going to do a false flag. And Russia goes, no, we aren't. And then Russian forces get attacked and they go, we were attacked. And all the West can do is say, it wasn't us. So actually, no, I take it back. I guess it was a savvy thing. It would give Biden the real opportunity would be that you can claim they're going to false flag. That way, when you attack, you can say, see, we told you it would be a false flag. The crazy thing is, would people believe it? I don't think it matters. I think all of these people are nuts. I think ego makes people lose their minds. No one's willing to back down. And I think the West underestimates Vladimir Putin's ego, his ideology. I don't think he's looking at this like, I want oil. I think it's a huge role, mind you. I've said it before. I think oil and gas and getting resources for his country play a big role. Majid Nawaz said, and I hope I'm getting his position right, but we talked that this was basically what Russia wanted. They don't want Ukraine and NATO. They want to be able to get their gas to the country. They want to be able to support themselves. And he also mentioned biolabs. I don't know about all of that. I know there were biolabs, but I think people are jumping the gun on assuming that's the principal reason for what's happening. I think resources play a role, but I think what really plays a role is Russia, Vladimir Putin, his pride, the power of Russia, the strength of their military, and Putin saying, I'm strong enough not to be pushed around. And I think that's why we're here. Now, one by one, the dominoes fall. Will China back Russia? Seems to be in certain ways. Will the other BRICS nations? Not so much so far. Who will join Ukraine's international defense force? A lot of people, seemingly. What happens if Russians kill U.S. veterans? The U.S. is going to be like, well, they went on their own. What if they kill a bunch of Latvian citizens? Is Latvia going to say we can't do anything about it? Or does it get to a point where Russia is accused of doing something unspeakable to a citizen of a foreign country? What if there's someone in Ukraine who is, Spanish or German, and they're not there fighting? They get captured by Russians, and the Russians torture them, assuming they're a foreign fighter. What will Germany do? How will NATO respond? These are all potential pitfalls because you get to the point where one side says, I will not back down. I mentioned this in a previous segment, but go watch the movie The Sum of All Fears. Old movie with Morgan Freeman and Ben Affleck. Ensemble cast, mind you. And someone is trying to trigger a war between the U.S. and Russia. Like, kind of like what they're accusing Trump of saying. Both sides know that it's outrageous, or I should say the U.S. thinks Russia nuked them. Russia knows they didn't, but Russia knows the U.S. doesn't care and is going to attack them, so they ramp up security and both sides prepare to wipe each other out. I'm not going to spoil the movie for you, but just watch. It's like, it's an escalation where both sides just refuse to back down. That's where we could be headed, and that's scary. Quasi-international war. Hopefully that's all this is. Maybe. And maybe a few years goes by and then everything kind of simmers down and peters out and nothing happens. I hope so. But you've got a hedge fund billionaire who's saying it basically already happened. It's already started. A member of Ukrainian parliament said it did. A Ukrainian activist speaking to Boris Johnson said it's here. I'm not going to say it. You can say it, whatever. They're saying it. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.